this earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us.
That was Representative Marjorie Greene talking about how she loves carbon. Carbon, it's so wonderful. What a great gas. And it's so wonderful, by the way, that we are burning through things that will eventually bring about an uninhabitable planet. But you know what? She loves carbon because apparently it's good. She loves it. So now, look, we know Marjorie Greene is acting as basically a good little mouthpiece for the fossil fuel industry. They literally buy her campaign. They pay her to peddle this kind of nonsense and garbage. The fact is that she is denying climate change, the science as usual, and of course the direct role that carbon, as well as other greenhouse gases like methane, fossil fuels are having when it comes to extreme weather events like droughts, hurricanes, sea level rise, etc. But before I get to that, I want to show you the full clip here in context of her statements, and then we'll break it down.
We've already warmed 1 degree Celsius, and do you know what's happened since then? Here, let me tell you. We have had more food grown since then, which feeds people. We are able to, producing fossil fuels keeps people's houses warm in the winter. That saves people's lives. People die in the cold.
Right.
This earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us. It helps us to feed people. It helps keep people alive. It helps. The earth is more green than it was years and years ago, and that's because of the earth warming. That's because of carbon. Because
now I love how she talks about, oh, it's so good because it feeds people, and then of course she always votes against funding for feeding people. Weird. But look, okay, so he says, well, again, the world, climate change, it's getting warmer, but you know what? That just means things are getting greener, and that's good. And plus, hey, it gets cold in the wintertime, and people die. People die when it's cold. Yeah, no kidding. Just ask Ted Cruz. Just ask Texas. And their completely non-winterized, completely privatized power grid that failed during a climate change fueled freak ice storm. Yes. Now, wait a minute, you say. How does global warming make ice storms? Explain it, libtard. Well, I will, but you might have to actually sit down and learn something. So you might, you might not be interested in doing that because you actually do have to learn stuff, facts, knowledge. But hey, if you're interested, great. I love open-minded people. So look, again, let's put it very, very simply here. Climate and weather patterns are complicated. I know. Scientists think that the polar vortex, so there's this thing, polar vortex, and what it does is that it basically traps cold Arctic air in the north. So now, what had happened in Texas, scientists are thinking that this polar vortex, it wasn't weak enough to keep all that cold air trapped. So it went further south than normal, all the way down to Texas. So think about it this way. The vortex is a spinning top. The faster the top spins, the more it stays balanced. But, and that's basically a strong spin. But if you have a weak spin, it starts to wobble, and that cold air starts to escape. Okay? And that pushes this cold air into the jet stream, and the jet stream carries the cold air across the country. So again, it's complicated, but also simple in a way. So let me show you this here. This is what a polar vortex generally is supposed to look like. You got your stable, polar vortex, keeps the colder temperatures up north where they're supposed to be. Then you have a disrupted polar vortex, and wow, that goes really far down south, even again to places like Texas. And that can cause some pretty messed up weather events. And again, there are issues with the jet stream also becoming destabilized as a result of climate change, putting all of that carbon, all of that heat into the atmosphere. And so now there's more. A recent study by Judah Cohen, the director of the seasonal forecasting at the Atmospheric and Environmental Research Center, published this study in the journal Science in 2021, found that the polar vortex is breaking down more frequently than it used to in the last few decades. So again, it used to be relatively stable. Yes, once in a while it would do that breakdown. Now it's breaking down more often. And that means more often this colder air, this polar air, is reaching deeper into the United States. That's not necessarily a good thing. As you can see, in a place like Texas, where you have those freak storms, it causes lots of loss of life and devastation. And so that's an effect of global warming, of climate change. In fact, here's what Cohen says. He says, my argument is that Arctic change from global warming is forcing the jet stream into a configuration that at least partially favors a weaker polar vortex. And other research, of course, corroborates, saying that when the Arctic is abnormally warm and has seen significant ice loss, which we had seen, the jet stream also tends to weaken. When that happens, you get more droughts, you get more heat waves, you get more cold spells, you get more heavy precipitation, all in different places in the country. And so all of this research is coming together and showing not just warming temperatures, but just a breakdown of climate. There is massive climate disruption that is changing the way things work. And when that happens, when you change that climate as rapidly as you're doing, you're making it so that humans and other species have to basically adapt to those changes more quickly than we would naturally be able to. And so that's the issue here with human-fueled climate change. We cannot adapt to the changes that we are making quickly by burning the amounts of fossil fuels that we're burning. So that's a problem. That's a big problem. So again, it may, like, if you don't understand how it works, it seems counterintuitive. Like, oh, what are you talking about? It snowed. It's colder temperatures in Texas. What global warming? What global warming? But I think that argument misses a lot of things, misses a lot of context, and really simplifies the amazing complexity of our planet and how little we actually understand the relationship between climate, weather, and all these different patterns and how these systems are all interlinked. Way more than just, hey, snowball, therefore eat it, libtards. Global warming, not real. I brought a snowball into the Senate. But let's get to her point about food, because I think this is very important as well. She says, oh, the planet's greening. That means we're growing more food. Food good, right? Well, I mean, let's just ignore the fact that we actually waste in the United States alone, about 40% of our food. So yes, we actually do produce a tremendous amount of food. Almost half of it goes to waste as a result of capitalism. But anyway, that said, we might want to rein that in because of climate change. There's going to be just some disruptions in the food supply. Climate change, according to a new NASA study published in the journal Nature Food, climate change may affect the production of corn and wheat as early as 2030, just 8 years from now, under a high greenhouse gas emission scenario. And of course, knowing Republicans, all they do is spew noxious gas into the atmosphere whenever they talk. Oh, and by the way, they also represent just their donors in the fossil fuel industry. So they're not going to do anything. And so we are going to have a higher greenhouse gas emission scenario, especially if, again, you have a midterm wipeout where you get Republicans taking the House and the Senate, making Biden an extremely lame duck, which I already think he's a lame duck anyway, because he's not getting anything done. But it'll be even more obstruction, even less getting done, even more money to fossil fuels. So when they actually do agree on something and do something bipartisan, it usually means we're getting screwed over. Regular people and corporations are benefiting. All you have to do is just look at the bipartisan corporate handout bill. And there you go. It's not looking good. And then you get a Republican president in 2024. We're back to that high carbon scenario. Not good. Now, let me give you the numbers on that, by the way, on how much. Corn crop yields are projected to decline 24%. Now, conversely, wheat could potentially see growth of about 17%. So again, it does show you the complexity. Some things will increase, some things will be better suited to the new climate as it changes, as things get warmer, and other things will not be as suited to these climates. And again, that means economic disruption. It also means food supply disruption. So these are very, very serious things. Now, onto the issue of greening, right? Let's get to the greening, which is ironic. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Okay, so one thing that I've never seen anybody answer about this is what happens to the places that are already green in this greening scenario. Can't really get greener, can they? And if the greening is driven by warming, which 97% of scientists say, yep, it is, then the warming, you gotta understand, it doesn't just happen in one or two places. That's why I call it global warming, right? So these places that are getting warmer, well, you're going to get to a point of where it gets so warm in these places that are already warm that the green will turn to brown. Well, that's not a good thing, right? Again, when it turns to brown, that means things are dying. If people that living in those places that were once green that turn brown, and they lose their ability to grow food, what do you think they're going to do? What do you think they're going to do? Well, a lot of people are going to move somewhere else. And you know what that means? Mass migration. Now, mass migration, also known as immigration. Where do you think people are going to go? They're going to go to other countries. They're going to try to get into the United States, European countries, wealthier nations for sure. You're going to see a migration from poorer countries that are not able to handle this, especially when it comes to the equatorial regions that are going to be hit the hardest. Island nations that are going to be sunk by rising sea levels. All those people got to come somewhere. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, well, you know how she stands on immigration, right? She's not in favor of it. So I guess maybe, though, she can look at that situation and go, oh, great, wonderful, mass migration. People are coming to the border. Now I can fearmonger and keep my seat in perpetuity because people are going to be afraid of other people trying to come in because of the climate change that we helped, or at least that we didn't do anything to prevent on our end. Now, one more point though, and this, she's actually right about this one. The Earth is more green. You know why? China. Fascinating. So according to NASA research, reported in 2019 by Mashable, 2 NASA satellites have watched the Earth grow greener over the last 20 years. Why? China's planting more trees. Millions and millions of trees. So literally, the Chinese are planting millions of trees in order to, I guess, maybe do a little bit of an offset of their coal usage. Now, of course, that's not going to do it. That's not going to be nearly enough to cover. They actually have to reduce their emissions. However, the report said China's intensive greening efforts have been vastly overshadowed by civilization's still rising carbon emissions, which at the current pace likely won't even peak for another decade. And China is largely to blame. And by the way, as some of you point out, as Bloom85 in the chat says, China's planting more trees, Brazil is burning more trees. And of course, they're burning the Amazon forest in order to make way for what? Agriculture. Specifically, cattle. So that's one way. And again, the Amazon is known as the lungs of the world. You might not want to mess with that. You might want to actually not let them burn the lungs of the world. So, yeah. Now, again, here's the thing. So, I see this argument all the time from the right on climate change. Even though, like, the ones that that admit that it's actually happening and say, okay, yeah, maybe we have something to do with it, but I mean, we can't really do anything because China's not doing anything. So why should we have to harm our economy? For one, who says that you have to hurt your economy in order to actually transition to, away from fossil fuels? You realize that, again, we're not really in control of fossil fuels. It's more of a world market. So when it comes to like, oh, energy independence, it's BS narrative. There is no such thing as American energy independence or American energy. It's Shell's energy. It's BP's energy. It's these oil companies' oil that we've just allowed them to extract from the ground and then send to the refineries. And then those refineries send the oil or the refined oil out to the world market. And they just go buy it. And so it's not, when you have a global economy, you can't really have independent energy, American energy, right? No, it's corporate energy. Now, the thing is, you actually can have energy that is domestic if you do things like solar and wind. I mean, you can't import wind. You can't import the sun. The sun's for everybody. Shines everywhere. So it's kind of stupid not to put out solar panels to collect all of that massively free energy that is everywhere. But again, Marjorie Greene, not the smartest people. Republicans, not very smart. And really, when it comes down to it, corrupt. Because again, this energy is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so they do not want anything to get in between them and their money. And that's generally what it comes down to. And so on that, by the way, we could set an example for the world by investing massively into solar, into other forms of alternative energy that will make us actually energy independent and reduce our reliance on foreign sources of fossil fuels. We can do that. We just have to have the political will. The whole idea that we should do nothing because China isn't able to do enough or isn't doing enough and is developing as well as India is absurd. It's a stupid thing. No, we should absolutely do something. There's no reason that we can't. And by the way, we as a world community really do need to come together on this and do something because at the end of the day, we share the same planet.